I really like it when Alabama quarterback commitments win the MVP at the Elite 11. You know what I'm saying?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, Luke. I don't even know what I'm not starting over. I can tell you that. But I'm a little discombobulated. It's Father's Day regardless. Hey, everybody, Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, that joke at the very beginning was brought to you by Father's Day because that's what fathers do is make terrible jokes on Father's Day. And I started out with one. Sorry for the bed hair, but yes, I have already got nothing. No, I'm not taking a shower. And no, I'm not starting over. It's Father's Day. I'll do what I want to. But Julian Sayin did win the MVP of the Elite 11, and that's where we're going to start today because I'm wondering, like, is Julian Sayin going to creep up on the number one quarterback spot? I mean, this Dylan Raiola, he's good. I mean, everybody knows he's good. Nobody's saying he's not good. And he's committed to Georgia, which now there's the Georgia bump. There's a Bama bump, a Georgia bump, and an Ohio State bump. So he doesn't even need it, and he's getting it. Same thing with Julian Sayin. But I'm wondering if Sayin can't end up passing this cat.
Certainly can. I think the number one, it just seems to me that it makes the most sense that whoever wins the Elite 11 event becomes the number one quarterback in the country. It makes all the sense in the world. There's a contest, practically a tournament that takes place to determine who should be invited to the Elite 11 event. They end up with who they believe are the 20 best quarterbacks in the nation that competed in the Elite 11 events. And then they put them all there and put them through a series of challenges, and then they declare a winner. And Julian Sayin, the Alabama commitment, was declared the winner as the best quarterback at the event. So it makes all sorts of sense that he should now be considered the number one quarterback ahead of Raiola. And that's not a huge jump going into this event. For instance, on three, my company on three, we had Julian Sayin as the number two quarterback going into the event. So it's not much of a stretch to say he actually deserves the number one spot. Just one word of warning or one reminder to people. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of the Elite 11 and how they do it. I'm not dissing them in any way. I like Elite 11, and I think they do a lot of good for those kids. They actually develop their talent. They're not just showing off. They actually work on coaching those kids up and making them better. But my point is, at Elite 11, they do all these things. You know what they don't do? Play football. I mean, they don't play football there. They do a lot of – it's a lot like the combine or your personal pro day workout, which are very important to determine who should go where in the NFL draft, but it doesn't ultimately decide the whole enchilada, right? I mean, your tape does, your season does. Actual tape of you playing the sport of football still matters a ton. So, yes, Sayin won Elite 11. Yes, we should be excited. Yes, it's kind of further verification of the kid we're getting in 2024, but he didn't play football out there, so let's not go overboard. And one more reminder, back in 2015, I believe it was. No, it's probably before that. 2013, the winner of the Elite 11 event was Alabama commitment five-star quarterback Blake Barnett. And as we know, not only was Blake never a good player at Alabama, Blake then wasn't a good player at Arizona State and then was just kind of a marginal starting quarterback at South Florida. So Blake Barnett had also won this Elite 11 event in the past. So let's not get too carried away. But is it a positive? Oh, yes. Oh, it's definitely a positive. Tua Tagovailoa won the Elite 11 contest, and he ended up pretty good.
Yeah, I was muted.
Of course you are. It's Father's Day.
Father's Day.
Why go through a holiday where you don't talk on mute if you're going to do it on non-holidays?
Look, y'all can get on to me for screwing up all you want to during the regular year. On Father's Day, at least Father's Day morning, I'm not a big believer in, like, if it's Father's Day or Mother's Day or whatever, that, like, you get the whole day to do whatever you want to. Life's not like that. You get a couple hours, and I'm cherishing these moments by giving you a podcast that I ruin on the regular. But regardless, what I'm not seeing here, for whatever reason, normally it has our Twitter handles beneath us, and I don't know why.
I know.
Let's see.
The good people know.
Well, how about that?
Look at you. Look at you
Does that
fixing
help?
it. Now I know who I am.
Okay. But a couple of things about the Elite 11. You're right. They don't play football. And I think that's the first thing everybody points to when their guy doesn't either A, make the Elite 11, or B, win the Elite 11 is they don't even play football. How can you really tell anything? But if your guy wins the Elite 11, everybody goes, my guy's easily the best. So, and we have been on both sides of that coin where you're right. Blake Barnett wins it, and then he never really amounts to much on the football field. He did win life because, to my knowledge, he ended up marrying that surfboard goddess who was worth $1 gazillion before he ever set foot on campus. So I think they got married. I don't know that, but I'm sure that's why he was so distracted. He couldn't never really complete a football career. But then on the other side, there was Tua Tagovailoa, who really what is happening? Do you hear that?
What is that? No.
I don't know. Okay, I heard a bunch of scratching noises or something. But anyway, Tua was not considered the number one quarterback, I don't think, until he won the Elite 11, and people were like, we got to consider this guy for the number one quarterback, right?
Right. I think that's correct. I think Tua vaulted to number one. And frankly, in terms of like what we expect in the rankings, it's very difficult to predict rankings. But I think Julian Sayin will move to number one. I really believe he will. I believe he will on three. And I can't speak for on three or really the other services, but I think Sayin is going to move up to number one based on his showing at the Elite 11. And you know, that's fine. I'm into recruiting rankings, as everybody knows, and I like them. But the kid's already committed to Alabama. He's not going to decommit. This is a kid that's locked into Alabama. So it doesn't really matter at this point where he's ranked. I mean, we're getting Sayin, you know, we're getting the kid as he is, right? Whether he's ranked number one or number 10, it doesn't matter really. But it does help in the recruiting rankings quite a bit when you sign the number one player in the country and all the points that gives you and the way they total up these things. But what a big weekend, and a nice segue into Alabama finally, if you want to say finally, offering Trent Seaborn. Speaking of the Tagovailoas, Alabama offered rising. Yep. You want to do
I want you to save that for another segment.
You got it.
Because here's what I got to do. I got to tell everybody about FanDuel first and foremost. FanDuel, you know, we love FanDuel. And look, they got the U.S. Open golf tournament going on right now. It's out in Los Angeles. It's on at night for some weird reason around here. I understand about time change. I like my golf at night for my time. But you can go to FanDuel. You can bet on anything. You can bet on the golf tournament. You can bet on baseball. The Braves are just scorching hot right now. You can bet on that. Anything you want to at Bet Online, at FanDuel, at FanDuel. I'll say that. We've had a couple of overlaps with sponsors sometimes.
Previous sponsors. Yeah.
Correct. So you don't want to miss your chance to snag that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. That's a no sweat first bet, $1,000. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. You will love this website. Get the app. It's so easy. It's so fun. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today. The rest of the week, we're going to be doing a lot more of Jimmy's countdown. But, I mean, there's been a lot happened since Jimmy was last on the program. We actually got the schedules came out. I don't think Jimmy and I really talked about them. I talked about them on a solo run, but I don't think Jimmy's talked about them. I may get him to talk about them later. There's too much other stuff, and that's kind of old news now. But then let's talk. I want to, before you get into Trent Seaborn, which is huge, I want to talk about Jamil Burroughs. Jamil Burroughs, a guy we're all looking forward to. And speaking of your countdown, here's how you know it's bad news that Jamil Burroughs is like a little bit in trouble, and it's bad news for us. We haven't gotten to him on your countdown yet.
That's right.
Like if we had gotten to a guy that's on your countdown and they get in trouble, I think we're sort of like, okay, we can live with that. But when you haven't gotten to guys that are on your countdown, that means they're way down the countdown, which is a positive in this sense because we're going to reverse order. So, yeah, this is a problem. It's not the end of the world. We don't even know if he's on the team or off the team. We don't know the whole situation yet. But, Jimmy, just tell us what we do know so far.
Sure. Well, Rivals reported a little bit on the story, and at On3 we've reported a little bit too. But in terms of what we know, Jamil Burroughs has been in trouble. it's not legal trouble. It's team trouble. It's violation of team rules type trouble. And his status with the football team is sort of up in the air. From what we can surmise at On3, we don't think it's resolved, or in other words, it's not a certainty that he's going to be removed from the team, but it is a possibility. It's also possible that he's going to remain with the team. Whether I'm sure Nick Saban, in consultation with leadership on the team, will be making that determination if they haven't already. But Jamil is in significant trouble to the point that it could result in his expulsion from the team. In terms of his importance to the team, you can't pretend like it wouldn't be a big deal. He is a guy that's going to play with the first team. He's not necessarily a starter, not necessarily one of our best 2 or 3 defensive linemen, but he's probably the 4th, 5th, 6th best guy. And that guy plays. That's a position that you do heavily rotate. We usually play about 6 defensive linemen as part of a rotation throughout the game. And no question, Jamil Burroughs would be one of those 6. But he's not Jaheim Otis. He's not Justin Aboigbe, not even Tim Smith, in my opinion. So it wouldn't be crippling, but it wouldn't be good. And also important, for the kid. I mean, I would hate for him to be removed from the team after being here for 4 years. This isn't a guy that's been here that just got here. Jamil Burroughs is a guy who has definitely, been a part of things for a couple of years. He's been on campus now, I think, going into his 4th year. That's not a good time to be removed from the team. I'm sure he'd land on his feet somewhere else in the transfer portal age. But nevertheless, not good news, but also wouldn't be crippling news. And again, to reiterate, no final decision made there. It's just up in the air as to whether he's going to remain on the team or not.
Yeah, and I mean, when do you think we will know?
This week for sure.
Wow.
I think it'll be this week in terms of us knowing something and able to report it. Here's the thing. I mean, in terms of how Alabama works, if he's staying on the team, we won't hear anything from inside the program. But if he's removed, they will release some sort of a statement that he's no longer with the team. But if he's staying, we won't hear anything at all. But I don't think these things take a long time to decide because we don't know facts. But this came from an incident. It wasn't like, hey, something that we've been dealing with over time. It's an incident. So they're going to make a fairly quick decision on this. So I would guess this week.
Okay. You have to be a little more diplomatic about some of these reports than I, because you do work for On3 as well. And I feel like I could probably stretch it. Look, I'm just going to say this. And if you want me to edit it, that's great. I'm not doing it. But I'm going to say that we've all seen a lot of the message board rumors that this incident may involve a run-in with a coach.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, theoretically, possibly, this coach could be somebody like, I don't know, Josh Chapman, who, by the way, was one of Saban's early recruits and who can bench press Bessemer. So my question is, I'm not asking you, Jimmy. This is a rhetorical for you. This is an actual question for everybody else. Do you, the listener, are you happier that we have a player so confident that he would be willing to take on Josh Chapman, who, as I've mentioned, can bench press a community? Or do you feel like, I don't know that I want a guy on the team who would pick a fight with the baddest coach we got, probably. Now, there may be some other coaches who go, you don't know how bad I am. True. If we say, though, we're going to circle up our coaches and have a group round robin fight, my money's on Josh Chapman. Y'all can have whoever else. I'm sure we got some other superstar baddies that love to fight. My money's on Josh Chapman. So I'm torn between either Burroughs is like super confident, and I love that, if hypothetically he were in an altercation with a coach, say, like Josh Chapman, or I'm scared to death that he's not going to do really well on whatever today's version of the Wonderlic is because he had an altercation with Josh Chapman. I don't know which way I want to go with this thing, but I'm hoping it just gets resolved this week.
Yeah, if you're going to pick a fight with the coach, I would assume Josh Chapman would come in dead last place in terms of the guys you'd want to take on. We don't know exactly what happened, so
it's all. This was all hypothetical.
And here's a feeling too. And again, one more hypothetical to add on. These things aren't really made in a vacuum, so I would think Jamil's behavior from day one he enrolled all the way up until is going to be a factor too. I mean, I think everyone's entitled to make a mistake. Everyone's entitled to lose it on one particular day over 4 years. But I'm sure his behavior during his entire time on the team will be taken into account as well. I don't think they would just, remove a kid from school, particularly a kid that's within a year of graduating.
Yeah.
Without
it's a bigger punishment.
Fairly serious thing.
It's a bigger punishment for Jamil if he's removed, I think, than say a younger guy who, their second chance can actually, like when you're trying to get a second chance as a guy who's going in to be a senior, working on trying to move up in the draft, it gets to be a bigger problem. You know what I mean? I mean, for instance, look at Brandon Miller. Now, it's a little bit just different situation in the age, but I'm saying Brandon Miller mistakes, even if they aren't really mistakes in the moment, he has no idea it's a mistake, is a bigger deal just because of his environment or surroundings or things that other people might be doing than say somebody else on the team who's not going to be drafted. Does that make sense? It doesn't look like you think that makes sense.
It does. And no, it does. And I also think when you've had Burroughs in the program for 4 years, you've invested. Alabama invests in each kid, and we're not talking about NIL. We're talking about scholarship, the training, the amount of training they get, the tutoring they get. He estimates that on every kid on campus, Alabama is spending $100,000 to $120,000 per year, on each kid. And so you've made a heck of an investment in Jamil Burroughs too, for a kid that's been there for 4 years, just so it's not a light decision. I'm sure it's not a light decision that Coach Saban is making, but that's why they pay him the big bucks. He's got to do what's in the best interest of the program. And you send a message to the other guys, in terms of, hey, what behavior is tolerated and what behavior is not. And I think ultimately that's what they'll be facing with and making this decision. But the kid's going to land on his feet. It's not legal trouble. If Jamil Burroughs is removed from the program, if that happens, I would guess he's going to be with someone else this fall.
Here's the other thing. That's not good for Jamil Burroughs. That's not fair. Because Tony Mitchell was given the quote unquote second chance, because everybody knows more about Tony Mitchell's situation. He was driving a gazillion miles an hour, had some illegal stuff in the car, or a lot of legal stuff that maybe shouldn't be legal or whatever. And it was late at night and it wasn't in Alabama and all these things. And Tony Mitchell's not kicked off. If Jamil Burroughs is kicked off under clandestine circumstances that the public doesn't know, they're going to go, oh my God. If Mitchell wasn't kicked off and Jamil Burroughs was, what in the world did Jamil Burroughs do? What I'm saying is this is bad news for him. But we need to take a break because I want to get back and talk about Trent Seaborn and some of these other recruits. I know that's what everybody really wants to focus on. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk recruiting. And we're back. And because some people use this as a visual podcast, I forgot to put these pictures up that I so carefully went and downloaded. There's Julian Sayin from the Elite 11 camp, and there's Jamil Burroughs. I was supposed to put both those up while we were talking about them, and I forgot. So, anyway, all right. Let's talk about recruiting from the weekend. I didn't even have this on my list to talk about, but since you brought it up, and because he may be one of the most well-known names in the state of Alabama, if not all recruiting circles, Trent Seaborn, the quarterback at Thompson, was offered by Alabama. You and I both thought he was already offered, but
he might have already been. As many offers as Trent Seaborn has, he has to be the most heavily recruited eighth grader in the history of the state of Alabama. I have no doubt that that's true, by the way. I know it sounds crazy to say that someone would have that title, but I know I've been following Alabama football recruiting since the late 80s. Trent Seaborn is easily, I can only think of one other example. Trent Seaborn's easily the most heavily recruited eighth grader in the history of this state. and one of the most heavily recruited eighth graders in the history of the United States. I'm quite certain. The only other eighth grader I can remember that had a lot of SEC level offers was Tim Castile, who was a first team all-state player as an eighth grader at Briarwood Christian. So very similar, but Seaborn plays quarterback. Seaborn plays quarterback at the #1 program in the whole state of Alabama. And Seaborn's relationship with the Tagovailoas, and we'll tell that story again shortly. I think when you add up all those things, quarterback from Thompson High School, relationship with the Tagovailoas, and then throw in all of the offers that he's gotten, including Alabama. Saturday, he was offered in Nick Saban's office with his family there, his mom and his dad, and he has a much younger little brother. They were all there when Nick Saban made the offer to Alabama. And who knows what's going to happen with Trent. He's just going to be in the 9th grade this fall, in terms of whether he makes an early decision or we'll just have to see. But yeah, I think he's the most famous or the most heavily recruited eighth grader. And because his recruitment is going to be a 5-year thing, I think he becomes the most famous recruit in the state of Alabama. When you're a famous recruit, that means people from outside football know who you are. And I do think over time, Trent Seaborn will get that level of fame. So, hopefully he handles it well. I do think his relationship, his private football coach is Ganu Tagovailoa, Tua's dad, who did such a good job with Tua and Talia. That's who's coaching Trent as a private football coach. I think that's going to help him because Ganu has been through this before, having 2 well-known, famous quarterbacking sons. He will really be a big asset to Trent and his family. In terms of handling, that's a lot on an eighth grader to be walking around the Galleria in Birmingham and every adult in the building knows who you are. That's a lot for an eighth grader to handle, but he's in good hands. Let's see what happens with recruiting. He will literally have his pick of schools. He pretty much does already. He could commit tomorrow to probably just about any program in the country.
With the elder Tagovailoa there, maybe that will help Alabama, and maybe eventually he will gonna be committing to Alabama.
He could. For people that don't know, quickly, he's not a cousin. That's a common story that he's Tua's cousin. That's not technically true that it's close, but Trent Seaborn's mother and Tua's mother grew up in the Hawaiian Islands together. They were best friends growing up, but then Trent's mother met a guy from Colorado, and she left the islands and got married, and had been living in Colorado for a long time. So they'd been apart. But when Trent showed signs that he was going to be a really talented quarterback, the family decided to move from Colorado to Alabaster, to the Birmingham area, so Trent could train under Tua's dad. And during that period of time, by the way, when they were moving from Colorado to Alabama, the Seaborns lived with the Tagovailoas, and that's where the stories come from that they're related. But they actually just lived with the Tagovailoas while they were, picking out a house, and it's a big move from Denver to Birmingham. So that's where all those stories come from. And of course, Trent's at the same program Talia was at, and that's where those stories come from. In terms of Trent's relationship with Alabama, I would consider Alabama to have an advantage recruiting because of proximity to campus and Tua's success at Alabama, but it is absolutely not some sort of a lock. I mean, Trent's going to be recruited coast to coast, obviously grew up in Colorado. I would hesitate to say that he's certain to end up at Alabama. I do think Alabama would be on the short list of the potential landing spots for sure.
Let's talk about 2 guys, and we can keep talking recruiting from this past weekend as the week goes on. 2 guys I want to talk about. One of them visited Alabama, one of them visited Auburn. Jordan Ross from Vestavia visited Alabama, and it seemed like he's finally coming around to the idea of, okay, Alabama's on my list. I mean, it seemed like Alabama really wasn't on his list. I'm not saying Alabama's the favorite. I just feel like Alabama may be in play now, which is a positive. Now, again, you and I have talked about this on the podcast. We've signed a lot of rush edge guys here in the last couple of classes. They're all good. So maybe it's a bit of a logjam there. But I'm of the opinion now you can't have too many of anything. Secondly, Perry Thompson, who's committed to Alabama, but he visited Auburn. And the Auburn boards are just going nuts with Perry Thompson up any minute. I don't think that's going to happen, at least not now. I mean, I think it's certainly a possibility, but I don't think. I think he does sign with Alabama, but I think he's enjoying the process and enjoying the moment, and I don't blame him for that. But you may differ, so go into those two guys to wrap up the show.
Yeah, sure. Jordan Ross, the pass rusher from Vestavia Hills. He's definitely the top pass rushing prospect in Alabama, in the state of Alabama in this class. I think he's already visited Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, and hasn't visited Alabama, but he did make a quick trip to Alabama, not an official visit. But on Thursday, things seem to go really well, and it looks like now he will make an official visit to Alabama later this summer or even in the fall. As Luke pointed out, the issue with him is just simply opportunity, because as we know, in the last recruiting class, the 2023 class, Alabama signed 3 5-star outside linebackers. 3. 2 is a crazy number. 3 is like science fiction, but somehow Alabama pulled it off. And since they've signed 3 5-stars at this position just last year, that's really used against you in the next class. I'm sure Georgia, Florida, Tennessee is on Jordan Ross going, why are you going to go to Alabama and get in line behind all of those guys who are just 1 year separated from you? You're never going to play there. That's what he's hearing from these other programs, and that makes some level of sense. But he's an in-state player. He likes Alabama, Vestavia Hills. A lot of his classmates who don't play football, they'll be going to school at Alabama. He'll know a lot of kids. And he knows a lot of kids on the team. So I think that will all be factored in. But it does appear that Alabama is going to be in it for Jordan Ross as we go through the fall. As of Perry Thompson, the wide receiver from Foley, fantastic player, has been committed to Alabama now for a year, but he really likes Auburn. He's gone to Auburn multiple times. He's had an official visit to Auburn. He may flip to Auburn. I just get back to what I said here on the show, Luke, when Hugh Freeze was hired at Auburn. Look, it's not the Harsin era, unfortunately for Alabama fans, is over. We shut out Auburn during the Harsin era, no doubt. That's not going to happen under Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze is going to sign players from the state of Alabama that Alabama wants. It's not going to be 10-0 when we're dealing with Hugh Freeze. Now, I do think Alabama is going to continue to sign the majority of kids when it's Alabama versus Auburn for an in-state guy. I think Alabama is going to sign more than Auburn will. That's my opinion based on 30 or 40 years of history. But Hugh Freeze is not going to get shut out. He's going to sign a few guys. Perry Thompson could end up being the first example of Auburn landing a high priority target for Alabama. It's going to happen. It may happen with Perry Thompson. We'll see. Perry's also strongly considering Georgia, by the way, and other SEC programs. So for a committed kid, Perry looks around a lot. But as we know, in recruiting, we need to pick another word because commitment doesn't really work, right? I mean, it's not really Webster's dictionary applicable, that word. Perry's looking around. He's seriously considering Auburn. They may, in fact, flip him. If so, of course, it's a blow to Alabama. But on the other hand, Alabama's recruiting a lot of the best wide receivers in the country. It's a position Alabama recruits extremely well. We have the number 1 2025 wide receiver in the country already committed to Alabama, and another 2025 guy who may be the second best receiver in the country in 2025. He's making a decision coming up fairly soon, and I like Alabama's spot with him. I'm talking about Jamie French, who's a wide receiver from the Jacksonville, Florida area. He's going to make his public commitment very soon, and we're sort of leaning it on 3 that Jamie French will select Alabama.
And again, that's positive and negative. If Jamie French commits to Alabama, the first thing Auburn's going to do is call Perry Thompson and call Ryan Williams and say, hey, another guy to steal catches away from you two. I mean, that's right. That's the first thing I would do. And let's also be clear. We're not predicting Perry Thompson flips. I don't think you think that, and I don't think that.
I think he might. I'm not going to say 50-50. If I had to I think there's a 60% chance Perry Thompson sticks with Alabama. But, read into that number what you will. I don't think it's 50-50. I would still favor Alabama because he's been committed to Alabama for over a year, and he likes Alabama. For all the people screaming NIL, this is all about NIL. Let's remember, Alabama doesn't exactly, shoot blanks when it comes to that issue.
Right.
We just signed the number 1 class in the country. Alabama does extremely well in the NIL era. And if Perry Thompson chooses Auburn, I wouldn't say it's because, Auburn's got some great big NIL offer that Alabama doesn't. So we'll just have to see. The kid likes recruiting. Hey, some kids don't. Jordan Seaton, the IMG offensive lineman, by the way, that we're recruiting, that Alabama may lead on, a big-time offensive lineman from IMG. He doesn't like recruiting. He may make an early commitment so he doesn't have to deal with this anymore. Well, Perry Thompson's the opposite. He seems to enjoy the recruiting process quite a bit, and maybe that's what's going on.
All right, we will talk more about this. This will be a story ongoing until Perry Thompson signs. I guess the question I would ask is, do you want to catch passes from the guy who won the Elite 11 MVP, or do you want to catch passes from somebody else who wasn't even there? There's another.
He's probably hearing that. My guess is he's hearing this.
Yeah, and probably from the guy who won the MVP. So, all right, let's call today's show a wrap, and we will talk tomorrow. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.